Hey guys, what's up? Evan from Stock Music Musician, and today I'm going to be doing a live stream on the 3 big mistakes I made when releasing my first album, which I just did about a week ago. For those of you watching this not live but later, the way this is going to work is that I'm going to cover these first 3 mistakes. It looks like I held up 6, but I'm just holding up 3 twice that I made when I released my album under the name Portance. It's sort of like a dark synthwave thing, and really it wasn't. I knew nothing was perfect when I started launching this album. I just wanted to figure it out as I went along, so that the next time I launch an album, I'll be much more prepared to do it. And I just felt like this was something I had to do with my life. So after I talked about the 3 big mistakes I made, I'm then going to go and answer any questions you have. This is also like some of these things, like a full-on blueprint of how to launch an album. I wrote up, like, it's thousands of words long, and there's going to be a link down below. So if you are interested in launching an album, go check that out. That really digs into a lot of the just big topics that it comes from launching an album, from registering it to art to getting music videos and press and publicity. So if you're interested, please check that out. And another thing I'm just going to say before I get into the 3 mistakes is that as a lot of you guys know, I think I do stock music. I license music on a website, on several websites, but the main one is Pond5. And so what I did was basically took a lot of the songs that I had written for Pond5, and it turned out that they all kind of made I guess you could describe it as they just inherently made an album, because I was trying to write songs of a certain style. And so I took that album and I took those recordings and basically turned them into an album. So if you can hear me, could you please give this a thumbs up so I can know, or leave a comment in the chat. I think everything should be working now. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the first of the 3 big mistakes I made when releasing my first album. And that is art. Album art, I put way down the line. I didn't try to find an artist to do it until about 2 weeks before I wanted to release the album, and that was not nearly enough lead-in time. If you have friends that do art, that's one really great way of doing it. You could also go to Fiverr and hire an artist to do album art, which is the route I initially took, or 99 Designs, which costs a bit more, somewhere around the $200 range, I think. I was looking at Fiverr for about $50. I've had a lot of good experiences with Fiverr, but the person that I was working with just really was not very responsive, and they took a long time to start getting to my design, and that just sort of started blowing up my release timeline. So as a result, I ended up making my album art by myself. I actually think it came out pretty well. What I did was find a piece of a stock image on Pond5, and then I went to the website Canva, which is like this graphic design website, and it has all these layouts you can use. And so I imported my image onto that website. It's free. And then did the text and added that all together, and I got a cover that I was pretty happy with. But honestly, the minute you decide that you want to release an album and you know what sort of sound you're going for, you could hire somebody, or you could start making that art on your own. And that is something I would really recommend doing, because you can send them like the demos of a couple tracks and they'll get enough of a vibe for what you're trying to do, and they can make the art from there. There's no reason to backload that. And that's something I really regret, because it jammed up my timeline a lot and made me worry about things that I didn't want to be worrying about towards the end of the release. So the second thing that I would really recommend spending more time on, and that I made a big mistake in not prioritizing enough when I released my first album, was focusing on press, or not focusing enough on press and publicity. Also, if you guys have any questions at any point, just drop it in on the chat and I'll try to get to them when I can. So the big question was like, who do I approach? How do I approach them? What do I say? And I did not give this any thought. I just sort of assumed that you put it out there and things magically happen, and I found that not to be the case at all. So, consequently, I've done a lot more research onto it, and I think there's 3 places where you can get the most leverage for your publicity. The first is to directly approach blogs that you like, that write about music in a genre that you are doing, and just, write them a short email, be like, hey, Johnny's terrific music blog, I'm a big fan. I've been listening and reading your blog for like 5 years. I just put out an album, and I'm wondering if you'd like an exclusive opportunity to review the first single. Please let me know within a few days. Otherwise, I'll just propose this to somebody else. And that's a great way to start getting some traction. And the thing about a lot of publicity is once you get a little bit, it sort of starts to snowball, and people will read about you in one location and then try and find you or try and get you for another location. So if you're just joining me, I'm going to tell you just real quick, this is the 3 big mistakes I made in launching my first album. The first was that I didn't put enough effort into art early enough. That's something I could have been doing from the minute I decided that I wanted to produce an album. The second has to do with publicity, and I'm digging into that right now and how I did not do enough time with that. And the third is going to be that I didn't outsource enough of all of the aspects of making an album soon enough. By the way, how's everybody doing today? Everybody having a good time? Looking forward to the weekend? Leave a comment. Anybody have any fun plans? I just went to see the Foo Fighters last night. It was awesome. They are clearly one of the best rock bands around and have been for a long time. They killed it. So, all right, I'll get back to the publicity thing, but leave a comment if you've got anything cool coming on this weekend. So, reaching out to blogs in a genre that you really are interested in and that is relevant to your music is a huge thing. And then I think the other place you can get a ton of leverage these days is with Spotify playlists or iTunes playlists. Any type of social playlist is just a huge place where people are going to listen. So if you can find a tastemaker in your genre, you might not be able to approach the biggest of the big, but somebody that's got, 50, 60, 100 followers, that's a great place to start pitching your first album if you don't have much traction. Yeah, Tom, the new album is super cool, and they played the hell out of it, and they're just live. They're crazily good, the Foo Fighters. They have a lot of energy. So how do you find somebody that makes a playlist, and how do you get on their radar? Well, it's not that different from the blogs when it comes to pitching, right? You just say, hey, big fan of your playlist, listen to it a lot. I just released a new track that I think would really fit in well. Would you mind listening to it and letting me know? But how do you find the people? That's the question. Especially like Spotify. It's not like an email list is linked to their profile. But most Spotify accounts are tied into a Facebook account. So if you search for the person's name on Facebook and the image on Facebook matches the image on Spotify, it's a pretty good guess that it's the same person. And then you could send them a very polite, short Facebook message just saying, love your playlist. I make some music that's similar. I hope you consider including it. And so with that, I think that's another really important way of getting traction. Now, these are things you're all going to want to do a couple weeks before you release the album, and you might not be sending them the actual live link on Spotify. You might be sending them a private SoundCloud link or private Dropbox link, just to get their interest, so that when you go live finally on Spotify, you can sort of blitz out of the gate and have your track suddenly appear on 5 or 10 playlists and get a lot of different like people coming in, and then that builds momentum and builds momentum. Ilyuwu, do you have a link? I'd be happy to check that out. Or is it just your profile image? And in a minute, I'm going to be getting to the third major point third major mistake I made in releasing an album. And again, I'm just going to say, like, I wrote a gigantic guide of everything I did right and everything I did wrong, and like my experiences releasing an album. And there's a link down below. It's totally free, and I'll be updating that as I go along, because there's just there's so many moving parts. And I guess one just side note, one big piece of advice I'd give is, like, maybe just release a single, like, practice. That's what I was doing. This is like, the album that I released is not like the artist that I would consider myself, like, not my primary musical character. But I wanted to release an album that I didn't care about quite as much, although I like it, just to get practice and to, like, make the mistakes on something that I don't care about as much, so that when I really release an album, I'll already be familiar with all of the moving parts. So failing early is a great strategy, and I'm happy that I made all of these mistakes. So now let's get on to the third issue, which is outsourcing. I wish I had outsourced more of the aspects of making my album, and I wish I had done them sooner. This would have included, like, making a couple of the music videos. You can find people on Fiverr, or you could, like, email a lot of, like, art school students, film school students will have portfolios up. Like, you could just reach out to them and be like, hey, I like this video you made. Can you sync, like, my soundtrack to this? Even if you don't have the final mastered cut, they can start working on that, and then you can send them the final version and they can drop it in at the last moment. And then another thing, so music videos is one thing I wish I'd outsourced sooner. Like I said, I wish I had outsourced the art. Well, I did outsource the art. I wish I'd done it sooner. I think I did all the website building and all of that. That takes a lot of time. You know, writing a bio takes time. Getting, like, just everything takes time. And I think it makes sense to get as much of that off of your plate as soon as you possibly can. The other thing is, when it comes to actually using musicians, like, I wish I had outsourced a couple of the instruments, just hired a studio musician from Air Gigs or something on a couple of the parts, because the amount of effort and time it took me to get a few things to sound the way I wanted was just so crazily absurd compared to, like, the amount of bump it gave to my recording. And if I had just hired somebody for like $50, I could have spent that time to do something much more productive for publicizing the album. So there you have it. Those are, like, the three big mistakes I made in launching. One, just not thinking about the art enough. Two, not doing enough for publicity. And three, not outsourcing enough. None of these were critical mistakes. I'm just going to keep on slowly grinding at this and learn from the experience. And for the next album I release, I know it's going to be better, that I'm going to have more traction. And, you know, I think a big thing is just not be afraid. Just put your music out there, grow from it, learn from each experience, and pivot to the next one, and keep moving forward. So now I want to open up the floor to any questions you guys might have about releasing an album or licensing music or making music or anything in between. I know you had asked me about your album art. If you want to send me a link, I will take a look at that right now. And if anybody else has any questions, let me know. So while I wait, I'll just take a couple more minutes to talk about how awesome the Foo Fighters were. I live in Washington, D.C., and we just got this brand new, like, state-of-the-art 6,000 person indoor venue called the Anthem, which is just like a cavernous palace of rock and roll. It was awesome. And so, like, getting the chance to see a band like the Foo Fighters, which normally plays in stadiums and arenas, in a 6,000 person venue was overwhelmingly cool. And I would say that anybody that's passing through Washington, D.C. should definitely try to catch a show there. It doesn't look like we've got any questions, so I'm just going to drop off then. But I hope this was helpful to you guys trying to figure out how to launch an album. I would say that, you know, if you're really worried about it, release a single. Even release a single under a fake name and just try and work out all the kinks, because there are a lot of steps and a lot of moving pieces to releasing an album. And I know so many of us just get paralyzed by fear of, like, well, is CD Baby better than DistroKid, or is BMI better than ASCAP? And, like, maybe a little bit in some ways, but that has nothing to do with the real meat and like drive of releasing an album, right? Like, that might move things 1 or 2 points, but most of what you're doing, like the core a bit is just making music, going through the steps and checking off all these boxes. And I would encourage you not to get bogged down in worrying about which of the, you know, tracks, which of the services, which of the brands, which of the publicists is the best. Just find something that's good enough and move forward. Tom says he released an album when he was 17 that he wished never existed, and but it was a huge learning experience for him, and that's something I fully support. It's also, I mean, being vulnerable as an artist is also a really important tool. It's like, you know, that's how you grow. If you just want to stay safe in your, like, home studio forever, then I don't think you'll nearly become as accomplished in the music you produce. You know, about 5 years ago or something, I decided that I was going to stop, like, making demos and actually start making music, finishing songs, even though some of them were terrible. You know, and some of my demos were really good, but just the concept of finishing is hugely important for making your music better. And then the idea of actually putting your music out there is equally huge for improving your music and helping you grow as a musician and an artist. So unless there's any more questions or comments, I'm going to drop off, but I'm happy to hang around for a few more minutes if you guys have questions. Or I would highly encourage you to leave comments down below if you're not watching this live, because once the live stream stops, basically the chat disappears. So if you have any questions about this, just leave a comment down below, regular YouTube style. And if you enjoyed this, you know, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. And I respond to almost all the comments I get. So if you have any questions down the line, just let me know, and I'm here to help. And hopefully, you know, this was helpful for you. Thanks so much.